Hey, welcome to Shop Night Live. And tonight, I'm excited because we're going to take you to buy lumber. I want to take you through the process and some of the little things you need to know to look like you know what you're doing if you haven't done it before. So we're going to visit a very cool lumber dealer that's about an hour from me here, but it's awesome and really user-friendly. But obviously, we can't do that live. We did that earlier today. We recorded it, and so we're just going to segue right into that, and then we'll come back live in the shop. So, to pick out the lumber, we want to have a project that we're actually selecting it for. So I wanted to do it for this hall table, this cherry hall table. The top is 16, and the length is 44. And the rails, the shorter rail is 11 1/4, but then there's a 1-inch tenon on each end. So I need 13 1/4. And then when we're at the dealer, we're going to buy some extra anyway. So I need 2 of those. And those are 3 inches high. And then the length of this long rail is 38 1/4. But again, I need a 1-inch tenon on each end. So we'll be going 40 1/4 for those 2 pieces. And then the legs, these little delicate shaker style or tapered legs are 1 3/8 square at the top. So we're going to need to buy squares like that, and they're 27 inches long. So I need 4 1 3/8 square by 27 inches long. All right, that does it. We've got our list. I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to step back in time and go get that lumber. All right, so we are here at Highland Hardwoods. This place is in Brentwood, New Hampshire, and Highland Hardwoods is one of these lumber dealers that actually caters to people like you and me, like that just want to build smaller projects. When I first started out, this kind of thing wasn't as available. You had to be like a contractor or a professional and buy wholesale large amounts and things like that. But what's great is this place, and there are a lot of others like it probably in your area, they cater with a retail section for smaller quantities. And they make it really simple to pick stuff out. So what I want to show you, and there's a lot of noise around here, so but I love this place because of how wide open, how beautiful and expansive it is. And just looking at in the bins at all the varieties of wood and the thicknesses and lengths, it just strikes your imagination of what you can do. Just think of the potential in this place. But when I walk in, the first thing before we start picking out for our table is we should know some terms so we know what we're looking at and how to think about it before we go and pick out that table material. This lumber, the vast majority of it came right from the sawmill, and it's been kiln dried. So it's dry down to like anywhere from 6 to 10% moisture content, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. But it also was sawn at the sawmill, so it's considered to be in a rough condition. Rough meaning it just came from the sawmill and it was sawn rather crudely, so it's kind of furry on the outside. It's not finished, so it's not that real smooth dressed wood that you want to get it down to. But it also is in unusual thicknesses. So at the lumberyard, they saw things like about an 1/8 inch over thickness. So this board here is a little over 1 inch thick. It's almost 1 1/8 thick. And it was probably sawn at 1 1/8. Then it went to the kiln dryer and it shrunk down to a little over 1 inch. Now, at the sawmill, the old method was every time they would click the handle to change the dimension of the cut, it would be 1/4 of an inch. So there'd be a 1/4 inch jump whenever they wanted to make, like, go from 1 inch to a 1 1/4 inch to a 1 2/4 inch. But anyway, they just used the term to describe thickness became quarters. So when you come to a lumberyard like this, you want to use the quarter terminology when you're talking about rough lumber. So a 1 inch thick board is a 4/4 board. Okay, that's the term for the sawmill. So 4/4, and this is here. So the thickness says right here, 4/4, all right? Then up here, we've got a 2 inch thick board. So what do you think that is? You guessed it. It's 8/4. And then this one measures about over 1.25 inches. So this is actually 5/4. There's 5/4, 6/4, 8/4, and then 10/4, 12/4 is 3 inch thick material like this board. And then there's even, check this out. Look it down here in the corner. Can you see this? This is usually about as thick as you find it. When it's 4 inches thick, it's 16/4. This is more expensive because it takes longer to dry, but that's a massive piece of wood. So I've used a lot of that when I built bedposts and things like that. All right, so while most of it is rough sawn, and in the 4/4, the 8/4, the 12/4 state, you do find occasionally some of it has already been run through the planer, and they've done that for you. So here's a little bin of African mahogany right next to the rough sawn. This is rough sawn 8/4, and then we have African mahogany here, and it's thicknessed and smoothed out, and it's down to 3/4 of an inch thick. Usually that's what they'll dress it down to, is 3/4 for you. And it's designated as S2S or S3S. Now all that means is the S means surfaced, the number means how many sides. So S2S means it's been surfaced on both main sides. S3S means it's surfaced top, bottom, and one edge. So it's been straightened on one edge. Now, if you don't have a joiner planer, that's a great way to do it. But what the problem is that it limits your options if you want thicker material. Like for our table, I want to have those side rails to be 7/8 of an inch thick. And you can't do that with this, but I can buy the 4/4 and I can dress it down myself with my thickness planer and control it that way. One other concern when you buy S2S or S3S is it's not always as true as you can achieve in your own shop, because it's been cut on a little more of a production setting, and it's not as always flat. Like, and I already see this has a bend to it. There's a little bit of rippling in it. It's just the quality of S3S. It's good, but it's not as good as you can make yourself. So it's a huge time saver though, and you don't have to deal with all the shavings. So if you have thinner material needs, it's well worth the little extra price per board foot that you have to pay. Now what do I mean by board foot? That's the other term that you have to deal with when you come to a lumber yard. Other than the quarter terminology, board foot is everything in how you measure the volume of wood that you're going to buy. Now, sometimes you may have seen when you go to a box store, you want to buy some molding or something, you might see the molding charges you in the linear foot. That just means that that molding, for every linear or length foot, you're going to pay that price. So if it's like 50 cents a linear foot for that little molding trim, and it's 10 feet long, you're going to pay $5. No problem. But what's a board foot? Here, everything you pay for is in the board foot. A board foot is a measure of volume of wood. So it's equal to 12 inches wide, 12 inches long, and 1 inch thick. So no matter what dimensions it comes in, if it's that volume, this is equal to 1 board foot. This is curly maple, rough sawn. It's 2 feet long and 6 inches wide. So that is also a board foot. So these two measure the same in volume. How about this guy? This is a 12 quarter. That's just showing the growth ring orientation there, but yeah, so it's 3 inches thick, 12 quarter. Let's figure this one out. I'm going to show you a quick little formula for figuring this out. So the width and in inches times the length in feet, then divided by 12 equals the board feet. Well, if we just look back at this piece here, the width in inches is 6 times 2 feet long. 6 times 2 is 12, divided by 12 is 1 board foot. Now how about this guy? This is 10 by 2 feet long, so that's 10 times 2 is 20, divided by 12 is 1 2/3, okay, or 1.67. So 1 2/3 board feet. But that's only one layer. Now we have to measure times the thickness if it's more than 4 quarters. So times 3, 1 2/3 times 3 gives me 5. So this chunk has a volume of 5 board feet right there. So that's what I'd expect to pay for, is 5 board feet. This is one of the few places I've seen who's makes it this simple to get board feet. They've got this numbering system on the ends of all the boards. This number right on the very end tells you how long it is. So in these bins, it could be anywhere, usually it's anywhere from 8 to 16 feet long. But this one here is 8 feet long, and it's 6 inches wide, okay? So 8 times 6 is 48, divided by 12 is 4. So we know this is 4 board feet, but look at this. They made it easy, really easy, because on the top they put the actual board footage in the piece. So here, I mean, couldn't get more user-friendly than that. So you know exactly how much volume you're going to have to pay for here. And then up here on the sign you have African mahogany. It's 4 quarter, that's right here. The milling is rough, and the price per board foot is $6.20. So you're going to pay about $24.80 for this bad boy right there. So it varies. You'll pay a little more per board foot for the thickness because the drying time is greater, and they don't sell as much of that. So the handling, the storage, and combined with the drying time, it just costs more to produce. So you expect to pay more per board foot in the thicker dimensions. The prices are all over the place. You can buy exotic woods here. You can buy, like, teak is up 20-something, over $25 a board foot. So you better be careful and have a special project for that. For our project, we're going to use good old American cherry. And so for that cherry, I know it's about halfway down here. So let's head down and we'll pick out our parts for our table. So I got a little distracted on my way to the cherry, because on the left-hand side here at Highland, they have what you see more and more at these lumber dealers are the planks or live edge planks for sale. So you can buy these huge planks of material, usually they're 2 inches thick, live edge, meaning they haven't been sawn at all, so you have the natural contours of the outside of the tree. You see these a lot on coffee tables, or now you're seeing them in dining tables a lot of times, and they'll be epoxying them and all kinds of things like that. But what potential you have with these. It's kind of a rustic, hardy look, but you get a beautiful cross-section of the tree, and they're usually wide and some of the best figured material. So that's another thing to look out for, and you can find it at these types of lumber retailer dealers. All right, we're in the cherry section, and before we actually pick out the cherry, I want to talk about some of the defects or characteristics of wood you might have to watch out for. Probably the most common thing, it's not really a defect, but it can affect the kind of board you choose, is called cupping. Now most wood, when it dries along the growth rings, as you can see I drew on the end of this, and it will dry and kind of draw up along the rings, so the board will actually cup and it'll be shaped subtly like this. But that's the whole reason for buying it oversized anyway. You want to buy it heavy so you can dress it down and control it and flatten it up. So cupping is something you see a lot. Then you also have a bow. Bowing is more how the board bends in length over the length of it. Now this board has a very slight bow, and this is S2S, slight bow like that, but I'm not buying that today. That's just one of the things you have to watch out for. If you need a long, true, straight piece and it has a strong bow, you may not be able to flatten and remove that. The other issue that you find, and you don't find it as often, but it is quite often, it's very difficult to deal with and almost ruinous to its possibilities of use, and that's a twist. Naturally, in some trees with the way they grow, or if it's sometimes they have a twist in them from the storms or just the stresses that were on the tree. So when it's sawn out into boards, the board itself will have a twist. And it can sometimes be hard to remove that after you dress it and all, especially on a long, tall door. You'd never want to have a twist. And that's one of the defects or issues with wood you want to avoid. Now the great thing about a place like this, Highland Hardwoods, is they go through and they pre-sort, and they cut out a lot of things so that all this material has been sorted through and looked over already before it's been put in the bins. So you won't find many issues that devalue a board to a point that you wouldn't want to buy it. Right. So there are a couple other characteristics or maybe considered defects of wood that we're going to also look out for when selecting our boards. The one most of us all know about is the common knot. So most of this material has been graded out, so it has very few knots to be concerned about. But it is something you want to keep aware of. One of the other things we'll be trying to avoid is sapwood. This is especially true in cherry. Some woods have a more pronounced sap, where you go from the heartwood, that's usually the richer, darker color that's signature of that type of wood, to a lighter colored outer wood that is, in cherry, it's almost white. So it goes from this deep kind of pink red to white. Walnut does that too with the sapwood. But then there are other woods you don't even notice the difference as you get to that outer growth layer. So we want to try to avoid sapwood for our table. I want to have it all that nice, rich, reddish cherry color. Another thing is called the waning. Waning is just where you start to see the outer curvature of the tree, where the bark has been removed, so you're not even going to have potential to get a board that wide. That's called wane. So just watch out for that. That's pretty unusual to find. But I actually brought this piece from home, so I didn't get this from Highlands, but just to show you these things. And then another very common issue is in the drying process. You'll see on the ends of boards what's called checking. And that's just like a little crack that has appeared at the end from the drying process. The ends dry more rapidly and they shrink so fast that the wood has to crack to relieve the pressure. That's why a lot of the ends are painted to resist or slow down that moisture removal from the end grain, so it reduces the amount of checking you'll see showing up in the ends. Sometimes it's wax as well you can put on there, and that just modulates or moderates the water coming out of it, and so it will be less stressful and resistant to checking. So that's most of the kinds of defects you want to think about when you're picking wood. The things I usually bring with me is I've got my list that we made up for our table. I like to bring chalk to mark out the boards, and then a spoke shave. Sometimes I like to just skim off that rough surface to see the actual color, especially if we have to match boards up. We want to see that we've got an agreement there. And then I'll also bring a calculator of some kind so I can estimate my amounts and all that. Now, the first thing I like to do on any project usually is find the thing that's the most important feature of the table, the most obvious, where I want to make sure I get the prime boards. So I'm going to get the top of this hall table first. Now, in picking a top, my top is going to be 16 inches wide and 44 inches long. So 44, that's 4 inches less than 4 feet. If I can find an 8-foot board, I can join that together and give my 44-inch length. Now, that'll only work if I have a board that's over 8 inches wide. Then I'll only have one glue joint. So most of the time when I'm picking out wood, especially for like dining table tops or tops of tables, I want to find the longest, widest material I can so I have the least amount of glue joints and the most harmonious, beautiful looking top. That was really common in like the 18th century. You see all these really wide boards. Quite often there was no glue joint at all. And it just simplified building the piece. And wide planks were much more abundant, especially in that mahogany that they were using on so much of the great 18th century furniture. So here I am. I found the cherry, the 8-quarter rough cherry. There's some nice boards down here. And that middle number here, as we know, is the length. These are 8-footers. They're all 8-footers, so that's good. Ooh, look at that. That's 15 inches wide. If that was just another inch or two, I could get my top out of it, but I'm happy just having one glue joint. So I'm looking for about a 9-inch wide. There's one right there, 9-inch wide. So I'm just going to put a check on that and see if there's any others here. That's 10. This has a little waning and sap. This is just over 9, so I'll grab that one too. Now with those checked, I'm going to pull them out and stand them up so I can get a good look at them. One of the things they like you to do when you're picking out wood is, return the bins in a neat order. So I'm also looking at the kind of the speed of the growth. I want some nice color and some fairly dense material. This one, it turns out, that's an 8-footer, but this one is not. I must have missed that. Maybe it said 10 on the end. Yeah, this is a 10-footer. Now, most of the times when you buy a 10-footer, you're going to find that it's 10 feet, 2 inches. They'll give you that extra length for maybe end checking or something like that, that waste you might have to cut off. So that's good. We got that going for us. But I really like the color and the texture of this one. There's very little sapwood. There's a little bit on this side. Oh, I've got more right there and more up there. So let's see. Yeah, actually 8 is way in here, so I'll be able to remove all of that for the top, and any sapwood will be underneath anyway. I'm going to lay this down a little bit now and mark out approximately the length of my table. So I'll assume that I'll lose a couple inches at the end, and then my top is going to finish at 44, so I'll cut it a little over 45. So this will be the top, and these two pieces will join together to make my top. Now I like to put the chalk on it like that, so when I get back to the shop, I don't need to rethink it and go through the whole process like, what did I have in mind for this board? This I already know. I can stick it in the van and I'm good to go. We've got our top all set. We need to pick out the rails. Now our side rails are 3 inches high, and we know we have around a 42. Let me see what we got here. One of them is going to be 40 1/4, so we'll get about 42, and the other is 13 1/4, so we'll figure about 15 inches for those as well. Those are the short ones. We need 2 of each. So they're 3 inches wide, but you don't usually find material that narrow. So if we get something about 7, we can rip it down the middle. We'll have 3 1/2. That'll give us plenty of material to get our 3-inch wide stock. So here I am at the cherry 4/4. This is a little bit narrower width, and I'm just looking for something that's 3. I've got some wane here and some sap, so I'll stay away from that. I'll get down. Here's one. Looks pretty good. All right, I've got a little wane at one end, but that's okay. This wood is actually graded and priced to allow a certain amount. So if it was a perfectly pristine wood, you'd be paying a higher amount anyway. So let's go with our long rails first. What did I say, 40 1/4? So we'll say 42. I'm going to come up a couple inches here. So I'll go maybe 43. So, and then I'll make a center line here. This will be rails. And then my 2 short ones, I'll just allow for about 15 inches. And there we have it, our short rails and our long rails, and we'll have some extra for another project. The last thing we need are our legs. Our legs are going to dress down to 1 3/8. So that's a little less than 1 1/2 inches, or when you were talking rough, 6/4. So I'm going to look for some 6/4 cherry, and I've got this bin right here of my 6/4 cherry rough, and all of these are like 12-footers, but look, I lucked out. I've got a 6-footer. Now you can usually get them to cut you a shorter piece here, and I think some places have a minimum of around 4 feet, but 6 feet's fine because I can get a couple tables out of this one. If we look at the width, it's almost 7 inches wide, so I can get 4 legs across, and this is freshly cut, so I don't lose anything. My finished leg is 27. If I go a good 28, I can get 4 legs out of this guy. So there's my table right there. And then I've got enough for another table if I want, or some other project up here. So this will be my legs. Now I'll just get one of the attendants here to get me a tally, and I'll pay for it at the desk. Let's get this loaded up. We'll head home. I'll see you back at the shop.